Go to the Grand Canyon.
In this video, analysis tool that's revolutionizing how traders analyze markets. And there's a thunderstorm at the other
End of it. What do you hear? It's like a rumbling. And then as it gets closer, you hear the higher pitched sounds. This is a fundamental physics principle.
So of these subjects that you just went through there for this New Start framework, where do you want to start?
I think actually sunlight is one of those things where I'm excited about all of those, but I think sunlight is really where we have, let's put it this way, it's the lowest hanging fruit.
Okay. Explain to me why sunlight is the place where your focus is at the moment.
It's a long trip that has gotten me to that.
Okay.
And I think part of it goes through right through. So as a critical care intensivist, when I heard that there was this virus that was coming, they all told us that it was going to be people with respiratory illnesses, which I was certainly comfortable with. But that's not what it turned out to be. We certainly saw people with respiratory illnesses, but what we saw in the intensive care unit, the people that were dying around us were people with obesity, people with heart disease, people with kidney disease, people with dementia, people with chronic diseases. And it made me think, why was that the case? All of those things have one thing in common, and many other things too, but specifically, they're rooted in something called mitochondrial dysfunction. So let me unpack that. And this has to do with longevity, this has to do with aging. This is a huge topic that is now just emerging, and we're now finding more about this. So when I was in high school biology, when I was in college, we all learned about this little organelle in all of our cells, except for red blood cells, called the mitochondria. And I have to say it, what is the mitochondria? It's the powerhouse of the cell, right? So it's the thing that makes energy. What we didn't know at the time is that as we get older, the output from these batteries in our cells drops by about 70%. Can you imagine running your house on 70% less energy? Well, how fundamentally that would change the energy. You could not run the laundry the same way. You could not run the microwave the same way.
And what does that look like in terms of symptoms?
Excellent question, because what it looks like is, depending on the cell type that we're talking about, that's going to happen. So if we're talking about the liver's going to begin to affect. We're talking about the heart's going to become more congested. We're talking about the brain, it's going to become more congested. And so what's happening is that as we get older, the batteries in our cells are not working in the same way as they used to. Metabolism is slowing down. And so these are huge issues. And all of these diseases that I just talked about, all the ones that we saw in COVID, you look, and a lot of these diseases are rooted in the mitochondria. So the question is why is that the case, and what can we do? So there was a paper that came out in 2019 that fundamentally changed the way I saw it. It was written by Russell Wright, who is the executive editor of Melatonin out of University of Kansas, and Scott Zimmerman, who's a light engineer. And what they set forth was to show that basically sunlight is made up of so many different types of wavelengths. You've got ultraviolet, and it's very beneficial. It's the type of light from the sun that is very short wave, but cannot penetrate very deeply. Let me back up a little bit and explain. You pull up to a stop sign, and somebody pulls up next to you, and they're playing the latest hip hop. How does that sound to you in your ears? It's very right? And the reason why is because low wave frequency has the ability to travel very quickly. Go to the Grand Canyon, thunderstorm at the other end. What do you hear? It's like a rumble. And as it gets closer, you hear the higher pitch sound. This is a fundamental physics principle. And so when the sun is shining, there's very short wavelengths, ultraviolet, but at the other end, there's this infrared light, which we talked about, or red light. It's very long wavelength, and it can penetrate very, very deeply. That's very important. What we're talking about is the human body. And if the sun is going to have an effect on the human body, it's got to be more than just the sun. So that's exactly what this paper shows, is that basically infrared light from the sun is able to penetrate probably up to about 8 centimeters, according to Scott Zimmerman in this article. And it fundamentally interacts with specifically the mitochondria. And what does it do to the mitochondria? So let's back up and talk about the mitochondria for just a second. The mitochondria to the cell is like the engine in the car. The engine produces locomotion, it causes the wheels to spin. But in the process of doing it causes heat to surround the engine. And if you don't deal with that heat, it will shut down the engine. It will make it more inefficient, and eventually it will shut down. So what do all internal combustion engines radiate? They have and that's exactly what the cell has to have for the mitochondria. It's not heat in the mitochondria, it's called oxidative stress. And it's specifically oxidative stress that causes destruction and destruction of the mitochondria and leads to these types of diseases. So oxidative stress causes the mitochondria not to work well. This leads to diabetes. Oxidative stress makes the mitochondria not work so well. This leads to dementia. So this has already been laid out. This is not that controversial. The controversial part is, what do we do about it? So what these guys in this paper showed was that, and not just them, but reviewing the literature, is that the mitochondria makes its own cooling system. And that cooling system is melatonin. Now, you might be thinking, wait a minute, melatonin, isn't that the stuff that we take, that our brain makes right before we go to sleep? Yeah, it's absolutely correct. That's what happens. The problem is that this is not melatonin that's made in the brain. This is not melatonin that goes through the blood supply and goes through our blood and tells us it's time to go to sleep. This is melatonin that's made in the cell, in the mitochondria. And it's a powerful antioxidant that basically prevents the oxidative stress from occurring. What Scott Zimmerman and Russell Ryder showed and proposed in this was that basically the